crazy. Give me a chance to explain this. What I mean is, when I was a high level Olympic athlete, I often played against people who were stronger, faster, and more powerful than me and still won. Why? Because talent alone never wins the gold. And these same principles apply in business. Look, competing at the highest level of sport taught me something that business schools never could. As an Olympian, I didn't just train for the podium, I trained in discipline, resilience, and high pressure execution. Look, these same principles apply to any business. It's what makes the difference between those good businesses and the great businesses. I spent my entire life learning about the winner's mindset. In the last decade, I've been able to coach Fortune 500 leaders, CEOs, and high performance teams on how to take the mindset of a world class athlete and apply it to business success. And in these next few minutes, Doug and I are going to explore some of those principles.
Wow. That is the most powerful opening I've heard in my life. That's really good. Welcome to the show today. Sherry Winn, former two-time Olympic athlete, is going to talk to us about the winner's mindset, the winner's leadership skills. Oh my gosh, there's so much I want to cover in 30 minutes. We'll see how far we can get. But the basic premise that I think is very powerful for this conversation today is that the number one topic for keynotes, for books, everything is always leadership.
Mhm.
And I keep asking myself, well, if that's true, how come we're still talking about it? Is it because we haven't figured out the formula? Is it because there's just different nuances to it? Over and over again, it comes up so often.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited to hear Sherry's perspective because she's not only works with CEOs of big companies like McDonald's, whatnot, but she also is an Olympic athlete. So we're going to talk about those two things together. So Sherry, welcome to the show. Give us a little bit of background about what you've experienced before getting into consulting in the Olympic area, and then we'll get into the topic.
Right. So I spent the younger years of my life being an athlete. I mean, I was All American. I was academic All American, valedictorian. Went into the Olympic Games twice in 1984 and 1988. Don't say I'm old. Stop it. I'm just wise. I'm wise. I'm wise. And then went into coaching basketball, where I coached a national championship team and took my team to three Elite Eights. And then in 2012, I decided to dive into something different. I
Mm.
really knew that I had gained wisdom from my experiences, and I believed, like you were talking about, Doug, I believed that this wisdom needed to be shared more because I experienced so many poor leaders and I watched poor leaders. And I was like, man, I know that people can be better. I know that leaders can be better. And I want to give that information that I've learned over my lifetime out
Yeah.
to the world.
So why are we messing it up for the past 50 years? I just don't, I'm so curious about. I saw you laughing when I mentioned that. What's going on with people? Why isn't there like, oh, this is the playbook, go do this?
Well, there's playbooks everywhere. I mean, there's so many playbooks. You can't even, I read
Yeah.
leadership books all the time. I just finished rereading The Five Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, what people don't invest in, and this is the biggest challenge of ever, is self awareness. Now, look, only 15% of the population is self aware.
Mm-hmm.
15. That's insane. Well, that includes leaders. I mean, that doesn't like, it's not just these people and then leaders, it's everybody. Well, you can't be your best if you don't understand how you're showing up. If you don't understand how other people are perceiving you, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't understand your self limiting beliefs, you can't be your best. It's impossible.
It's a little Schrodinger's cat thing too, right? I mean, what you perceive of yourself, the way I perceive my strengths and weaknesses, while they might be true to me, it might not be true to somebody else. So how deep can you go into self-awareness to where you're objective about it?
Oh man, it's a never ending. It's never ending. There's no stopping this. And you would be
Yeah.
surprised, maybe you wouldn't, Doug, but you'd be surprised at the number of CEOs that I work with. And the first thing out of their mouth is, I have imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome. I'm like you and everybody else in the world. So let's just get that out there. Like nobody does not have self-doubt when they're learning something new.
Yeah.
That's just part of the process. And what you've got in your mind is you have something and now you're looking for it and now you're attached to it. Well, there's no possibility of getting beyond it when you've attached to that very same thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say in my last book I wrote, in the 7 Secrets of Being a Truly Powerful Winner, the first chapter is all about self-awareness. And then self-awareness is sprinkled throughout the book because when I interviewed over 200 leaders, Doug,
Yeah.
80% of them said, when I asked the question, what's the biggest challenge you've ever had to face? 80% of them said, myself.
Okay, so they're aware of their awareness, right, or lack of awareness. That's good.
Mhm.
That's good.
Well, those are the ones that are really good. You got to remember, those are the winning, those are the gold medal leaders we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Those are the people who are the best of the best of the best.
Those,
So,
but that's 80%. That's a good number. It's Pareto's principle there,
well,
and
out of
that's good.
200, yeah. I mean, but you
Yeah,
also have to remember that only people that want to be interviewed show up.
that's,
So,
that's
right. So,
right.
if somebody's afraid of being asked a question,
Oh
they're
yeah,
not going to say, yes, I'll go to the interview. I mean, they're like the ones like,
yeah,
I know it all. I don't need to do this. Are you going to pay me for this? How much do I get? All
yeah.
of those people, they're not going to be interviewed.
Right. They've already they're already aware of something, non-servant leadership. Okay, interesting. So give me. I'd love to hear a story about the toughest nut you had to crack on self-awareness.
Wow. There's so many. I
And no
mean,
names, of course. We can keep it anonymous. We don't
there's
want to
so
embarrass
many.
anybody.
There's so many.
Yeah.
It's just amazing the number of people that don't know what they don't know about themselves,
Hmm.
right? And I'm still in that. Like I'm not beyond that yet because there's still
Yeah.
things I don't know about me. But it is, it's like I was working with somebody the other day and they said, my partner says, so the partner in business says that I'm controlling.
Hmm.
I said, well, in what ways are you controlling? I don't know. I mean, it's a very like I don't know.
The conversation, perhaps.
So, but that's just the truth. But
Yeah.
I will say, here's one of the big ones that really made a difference is I was a CEO called me and said, "Can you work with my executive director?" And of course, I'm going to say yes. Of course. What's the challenge here? And the CEO explained that the executive directors really struggled with getting coached. Right? Got defensive, got angry, got mad about it, and then had a struggle too in coaching her own uh, team members because
Yeah.
she didn't want them to get mad or reactive at her. So, here's the whole problem. It was really a simple resolve. I mean, truly, is I do this thing called Q-tip, all right? And so it's not the thing you put in your ear, but even when I'm talking to people, let's say I have 1,000 people in the room, and I'll say, finish this quote for me. Quit taking it
Personally. Yeah.
personally.
Uh-huh.
Almost everybody in the room goes, yeah, I got it. And then I ask the question, how many of you have allowed what somebody else has said to you ruin an hour of your day? 100%. Yep, 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 yep. Right? Well, that's taking it personal. So
Yep.
even though we know the concept, we don't live the concept, we don't use the concept.
Yep.
It's the same thing that happened with this young lady is that she was just taking everything personal.
Yeah.
So she couldn't receive coaching because she took it personal. It hurt her, like she went away wounded, right?
Yeah.
And so many of us are waiting to be wounded. I mean, think about that. How many people do you know are waiting to be wounded? They're waiting for somebody else to
Oh.
say something for them to get upset,
Yep.
right? And
They're
so,
expecting it,
and
and so they attract it. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. And so it's the same thing that happened with this young lady is we just worked through this whole idea of it's not about you, it's about other people. Like you got to understand, people can only speak from their own lifetime of experiences. It's the only place they can speak from. So when they're speaking to you, it has nothing to do with you. You make it about you,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Yep.
So you can decide when they're coaching you, are they truly coaching you? That is this true? You can sit down and go,
Hmm.
is it true? Well, if it is, doesn't mean you're bad. Just
Right.
means you need to
Yeah.
grow, right? And then the same thing happens when you're coaching your people. If they get reactive, look, it's not about you unless you're really like, if you're being demeaning, demoralizing, and destructive,
Yeah.
yes, it's
Yeah.
you. But what happened to this person? We worked together for a year, and Doug, the most incredible thing happened. Within a year, she was promoted to senior vice president, right?
Wow.
That's how much that little piece of self-awareness can affect somebody.
I had a handwriting analysis done a couple of years ago, and it was freakishly accurate in terms of taking things personally. I'm like poster child for it. I'm like, even my wife might say something like, I have to like catch myself. No, it's not personal. It's just factual. Right? So it's,
Right.
and so I've got
Right.
I've got the four agreements in my bathroom. Like I have to reread that like every few
Best book
months.
ever.
Right? I
Best
just
book
love
ever,
that.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
beyond my book, best book ever. it's
The
it's a
second best book
phenomenal.
ever
Yeah,
after
it's a
yours.
phenomenal book. Like that was the book. The Four Agreements is really what started me on my track. I mean, I read
Yeah.
it. Somebody gave it to me years
Mhm.
ago,
Yeah.
and I read like that book, and I reread it often,
Yeah.
just as a reminder.
Hmm.
But one of the things in that book was, about taking things personally, and it
Right.
changed. It really changed my life.
Yeah.
Changed my life. And now I get to change hundreds of people's lives with that
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
information.
Why do you think we do that? What do you think is going on in our neuroscience? Is like, wait, why? If someone says like, "Hey, you're fat," and we take it personally, well, what if it's true, but it's not an insult; it's just factual? I mean, I don't know. Why do you think we always go towards personal first, even if it's not?
Well, we're taught to do it. I mean,
Hmm.
what are our shows? I mean, name me a TV show where somebody doesn't take something personal, right? I mean, what about news? Like everything is personal. Like, I mean,
Yeah. They don't call it
and
news
so
anymore. It's called propaganda, but okay.
well, yeah, no, there's no news. I agree with that. And so it's really we don't know better. I mean, if we knew better, we'd do better, right?
Mm.
And we don't know that what we don't know is this: when somebody else is speaking to us, they're speaking from their own lifetime of experiences,
Yeah.
and their own lifetime of experiences, there's a lot of adversity that's happened. I mean,
Yeah.
like when I talk to clients and they talk about their lives, I mean, I have to keep my jaw from dropping when they're telling me things about, when their, dad was murdered, when they watched their principal get shot
Right.
in the head. I mean, like, this stuff has happened to people, and then they can choose to take a road of getting better, but most people get bitter because they don't have the tool set
Mm-hmm.
of resilience, which is something I teach. They don't have the tool set of resilience, and so they choose bitterness. Now, what happens is they take that bitterness and they get more bitter and more bitter and more bitter, and it's the way they see the world.
Yeah.
Yep, way they see the world. And now all they're doing is when they're talking to you is you're taking all those stories and they're throwing them onto you. So it has nothing to do with you. It's their
Yeah.
perception of life.
Well, I heard it's sort of like projection, right? Hurt
Yep,
people, right? If you're
yep,
hurt, you tend to, project your hurt
100%.
onto others for some strange reason. But yeah,
Mhm. And so, how many people do you know like that in the world? I mean, so many, because those people haven't done the personal development work
yeah,
to get beyond that, and they haven't invested in themselves
right,
to get to that space. And that's why, when companies hire me, they're excited because there's big results at the end.
yeah. It's an
And they want to
ongoing
quantify
thing.
it, like, but it's really hard to quantify because the leader just shows up differently, right? They show
Yeah,
up differently, they speak differently, they get people more engaged, people are excited to come to work. I mean, all that stuff happens,
yeah.
right? When you've got around somebody around you that makes you excited, you want to be there.
I'm talking to one right now. Absolutely, I'm serious. Like yeah. Somebody told me something years ago. I'll never forget this. But he said, when your phone comes up and there's a name there, and if you get excited about it, that's good. If you get like, oh crap, it's like you've got to understand there's energy there, but there's also history.
Yeah.
And when it was clients, I'm like, oh no, it's this one. And I started having the maturity and carefully filter out who I work with now.
Right.
And so I'm sure you've had this experience, but sometimes it's not a good fit, however you want to say it. I'm like, we're going to end this. I don't want to see that. I don't want to stress out seeing your name on my phone anymore. So,
Well, I mean, it's a great point. I mean, how many people, have I worked with, leaders I've
yeah,
worked with, that have a dysfunctional being on their team. So they have somebody who's dysfunctional,
yeah,
clearly toxic, but they're like, we can't fire him. I'm like, why can't you, or her? Like, I'm not, we can't fire him. And
yeah,
I'm like, why? Well, he's our number one sales leader. And I go, and you've lost, let's talk about this. You've lost like six other people on your team. You have to keep rehiring. Nobody wants to work with the individual.
yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
really, you're not winning what you think you're winning. And the next thing they say, Doug, almost always, I just had a company say this to me.
Mm-hmm.
They said, well, they'll go to our competitors. And I'm like, good. Like, they'll go ruin their team. Like,
send
let them go ruin
send
their
the
team.
toxic gas over there. That's fine.
Right. And so it's there's a lot of that that occurs. And I saw that like as an athlete. I had somebody on my
Yeah,
team that was clearly toxic and they kept. As a player, as a coach, the number of teams that have a toxic person, I would cut mine. Like I would have that conversation. You need to go somewhere else. I mean, I would work with them. Look, I'm not the first person to say just get out. Like
yeah,
my first response is how can we coach you? In what ways can
yeah.
we create the self-awareness so you understand what you're doing to yourself and to the team?
Right.
And so, that's always my first response is let's coach
Mm.
the person up. Look, but
Yeah.
if they don't want to be coached, then you have to let them go. No matter
Yes.
how good they are, no matter how amazing they are, they're going to ruin your team. But so many people hold on to that toxicity and they can't
Yep.
understand why they're not having the business success.
And I was talking to a CEO about this exact thing just about 4 or 5 months ago, and they said if you keep them on, you're doing them a disservice
Yes.
because they're not supposed to be there. Wrong seat, wrong bus, however you want to phrase it. If
Right.
it's not working and you hold because, oh, job or whatever reason you have there, it's a disservice. They belong at that other company. They belong somewhere else.
Right.
You're
Right.
actually keeping them captive for the wrong reasons. It doesn't help them or you.
Right.
So I think it's a good, firing perspective. It's like, oh, you know what? There's a
Yeah.
better place out there for you. It's just not
Well,
here.
and not just a better place. It
Yeah.
might be the very thing that they need to
Hmm.
make that deep
Yeah.
change,
Right.
right? I mean, because
Right.
it's not just affecting, like let's be real. It's not just affecting them at a job.
Hmm.
Like if you were to dive into their personal life, it's affecting their spouse, their kids. I mean, it's
Yeah.
affecting their entire life. And
Right.
so it may be the wake up they call they need. And maybe they need five, like some people do. I did. Maybe they need five wake up calls to get them where they need to go.
Yeah.
But look, you're hurting them by allowing them to continue something that is harming them personally
Hmm.
and professionally. Like you are doing that to them.
Yeah.
And so, when I convinced this company, I said, look, you got to get rid of this person. And they were so convinced that they were going to lose sales. Well, they increased sales by 30% as soon as they left. Like as soon as they terminated the person. Why?
Wow.
Because you gave everybody else the opportunity to step up. You
Hmm.
got them out of that. Like if you're in a toxic environment, we all know that we become less. We become
Yeah.
less than ourselves. We do. It's natural. You get scared, you get nervous, you're intimidated, you start becoming less than yourself. How can you function? You've seen that happen. I know you've seen that happen.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't function there.
Yeah. So okay, so let's move forward. I'll say so if you can get them to be self-aware to some level, that's step one.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm aware that I'm taking things personally. Whatever my issue is, what's next?
Well, I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, you have to
Yeah.
apply it. I mean, I see so many people go, "I got this." I'm like, "Oh, so you've been doing this all your life, and now you've had one conversation, and you're like,
Yeah.
I got it. Like, let's do it." I mean, that's where the coaching, it's repetition over time. So,
Mm.
as a basketball coach, Doug, I never, not one time ever, did I go into practice and say, we're going to practice this one time and expect people to do it. Ever.
Wait, big dramatic pause here. That's a really good analogy for you people out there in business. You don't just dribble one say, "Okay, I got this." That's
I
I
mean, I
know it
can
sounds
remember,
obvious to me,
yeah,
but it needs to be reiterated. So that's
yeah,
good.
I had a young assistant coach once, and she had played for me. So now,
Yeah.
first year of coaching with me, and we get to a game, and she looks at me and she goes, Coach, they're not doing anything we taught them. I go, I know. I said, I know. And she goes, but we taught them this. We've done this for like weeks. I said, I know.
Yeah.
And she's like, what? And I go, we just haven't done enough.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the truth. I think so many people, they think a weekend retreat is going to do
Yes.
it.
Oh my
Right. Or a
gosh. Yeah.
one time conversation is going to do it. And it's like, if you don't want to bring somebody in to have the consistency, like a coach or whatever,
Yeah.
you have to take over that consistency. Like your team
Yeah.
has to make something that is consistent, and you have to call people on something that they're doing that's harmful to
Yeah.
themselves and to the team.
Hmm.
Like that consistency has to be there. And if it's not there, look, people are going to fall back into old habits. Like you just can't expect somebody here at one time and for them to do it. It's ridiculous
No,
to even think
it's like
that.
a rubber band. You stretch it for the keynote, and then as soon as you leave, it goes back. You got to have that ongoing support. That makes so much sense from
Yeah,
athletics as business and self development. Very, very true. So
absolutely.
what's the biggest or most proud success story you have as a leadership consultant?
Well, this is one of them. So I had a CEO call me and he said, "Look, we have a CFO and he just lost us $1 million." And I go, "Well, I can help you." He goes, "Really?" I said, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
He said, "Right now." I said, "Yeah, fire his butt. Like I'll help you." Like in the story, you don't have to pay me. This is good. It's all over. He goes, "Well, I want you to coach him. I want you to give him a chance." I said, "Well, of course. Like of course, I will do that for you. Absolutely." So I started working with the CEO or the CFO, and it was
Yeah.
very apparent to me right away that he struggled with a learning disability. Nobody else had identified this. And I
Wow.
was like, oh, like he struggles with processing things.
Wow.
So I was like, let's work on that. Let's figure out a way to work on that so that we can get you to process things differently
Hmm.
so that you're able to think differently. Right. So I worked with him, and like 3 months later, the CEO calls me and goes, I need to talk to you about the CFO. I'm like, oh no,
Uh-oh.
oh no, oh no. Like, oh no, what's happened? Like, and he goes, he just made us $6 million. I'm like, dude,
Five
you did
million up.
not pay me enough. Like, you need to increase my salary. You did not pay me enough. So that's something that can happen. I mean, that doesn't happen all the time, but it's a possibility, Doug. It's a
Oh.
possibility when you have somebody who's working one-on-one, because you know what, people don't spend that kind of time, like they don't spend that kind of time with individuals, right? It's a short
Yeah.
session, they don't get in the depth of things. And so one of the things that I do that a lot of coaches don't do is I give people winning success steps after we have a conversation.
Hmm.
And that's homework, Doug, but I don't call it homework. Nobody wants to do homework.
Yeah.
It's winning success steps, you know. And at this moment, when you have to write something down, it's totally different. When
Hmm.
you have to write, this is gonna, like I was talking about the woman who was like, I don't control. Well, I said, write down 5 ways that you try to control situations. And then she comes back and she goes, oh,
Yeah.
wow, wow,
Hmm.
right? So it's that kind of thing. It gives you that opportunity to really like come, like that self awareness. That's that deep self reflection. And
Sure.
so we do that. Oh, every time I meet with somebody, we have that those winning success steps that allow people
Hmm.
to dive deeper. And Doug, I want to tell you why I do that.
Yeah.
So when I was 35, I developed chronic pain. I couldn't sit, stand, or walk without pain. I went to
Oh.
17 different medical professionals, had every test known to mankind, and nobody had an answer. And so after that 17th doctor, I'm like, okay, I'm done with Western medicine.
Hmm.
I'm going to go to Eastern, like I'm going to go to New Way thinking because somebody has an answer. It's just not these people. So I got involved with these specialists, and what they did is they said, look, your mind, body, and spirit are all connected. And I'm like, well, that's a bunch of crap, first of all, right?
Hmm.
Whatever. But when I started working with them, I started getting better. And one of the things they made me do is they said, I want you to write down 25 ways that you use your anger. And I went, I'm not even angry. Like, this is so silly. Right. And they said, well, you have to be really specific and don't come back until you write them all down.
Oh boy.
Doug, when I wrote down 25 ways that I use anger, I was like appalled at myself. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I do this to
Wow.
people. I can't believe I do this. And it really started the change in my world. I mean, it was the start of healing. It's when I recognized how angry I was and how much I used it. And I think that people could have that same life, like awareness, that same like boom in their life, that epiphany that changes
Hmm.
everything because it changed me in my world.
Man, that's so fast. So yeah, I'm thinking the Matrix, right? The body cannot live without the mind. Talk about all your physical pain and trying to treat it tactically or superficially, and like, oh no, it was this stuff, huh?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow. I'm letting that sink in for a second. That's really fascinating. How long did it take you to like did the pain go away pretty quickly, or take a little while, or what was the
It took time. I mean, it was 2 years of me going to doctors first, and
right?
doing several tests. And then when I started this process, the first thing I did was, of course, close my mind to it
Yeah,
because it was something I didn't know, didn't understand, didn't believe.
yeah,
And you can't get to the next place in your world if you have a closed mind.
yeah. Right.
So it took me a while to just, I mean, I kept going back because I got better, right? But
Okay.
I was still closed minded to some of this stuff. So it was a process. It was a lengthy process, a
You
lengthy
got to keep
process.
doing the drills, coach. You can't just do one time, right? Goes back to that same concept.
Absolutely.
Oh my
Absolutely.
gosh.
But over time, if you're committed to getting better, like
Hmm.
if you're committed, you will.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you will.
Yes, I was talking to somebody about a weight loss last year, and they said it's not that got to lose weight. Lose is like a negative term, Bob. Like I said, as soon as you make the decision, that's the most important part, and then your body has to catch up
Mhm.
with your decision, right? So the actually decision point was, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to
Right.
think, eat, train like an athlete, and your body's like,
Mhm.
no, you're not. You're you're flat. Like that's okay. I made the decision. Catch up to me, would you?
Well, and here's something I just learned. I think this is an incredible thing I've already used on a few coaching clients is
Yeah.
this. When you say something like I'm fat and you leave that there without closing the loop, then it becomes more powerful. But if you close the loop by saying I'm fat and I'm choosing to think this way,
Yeah.
period, it closes the loop because now it's a choice. I'm choosing to think this way,
Yeah.
right? And it just closes the loop. And
Yeah.
it's a very different experience if you could sit with that for a little bit,
Yeah.
and you close the loop, like it changes every possibility.
Do you know Noah St. John's book Affirmations?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I gotta get this to you. He's a friend of mine. He wrote a book called Affirmations, not Affirmations, because affirmations don't
Or
actually work.
right.
And I was like, wait, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, you can talk to yourself all day long that you're happy, healthy, terrific, but your subconscious mind that runs the show says, no, you're not. So what he does is he takes the entire concept of affirmations and puts it in a question format. So it's like, hey, why am I happy? How does a healthy person eat? And you put the question out there, and you know how the brain works, Sherry. It's like, oh, the brain's got to solve that.
Yep.
It's gonna. You say that at the end of the night, your brain's gonna work on that all night long.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And it,
I think I heard him actually one
yeah,
time, which
yeah,
impacted me. I think I heard him on a podcast one time,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
realized that was so true because affirmations, if you say things that you don't think are true,
yeah.
your BS meter goes off. It's like nee,
Yep.
nee, 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 nee.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're
Yeah.
going to say an affirmation, it has to be something that you believe is true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, like if you say I'm fat, you go, well, I'm always willing to learn. I'm really good at learning. I have a
Mm-hmm.
great dedication. I'm very committed to things that I believe in. I mean,
Yep.
because those things, if they're true about it, it shifts something,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you're like, I'm going to weigh 100, 50 pounds like next month. Well, yeah, your BS goes, no way.
Yeah.
And so now you're already fighting, you're already in resistance phase, you're fighting against
Yep.
yourself. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the little key for
Right.
people who want to, if you want to say something, you want to say positive things to yourself, but if you're saying positive things that you don't think are true, it's resistance.
Yeah, which I think also applies not just to self development, but I use it in like marketing and sales. I'm sure in coaching, um, that you can give them some value, but ending on a question causes them to think, right? So I think that's very valuable information for people. Hey, if you're going to go ahead and try to impact, influence, persuade somebody, shut up and ask them a really good question.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, they have a story about that. So I have a story of the CEO who called me. He's
Yeah.
like, I'm going to lose my job. And I go, uh-oh. He goes, yeah, the board of directors called me and said, it's September. He said, I'm going to lose it in January if I don't change. I said, what's the deal? He goes, well, I'm a great storyteller and I'm really funny. I'm like, well, okay. Tell me a specific challenge that you have. And he goes, well, like I have a big adversary on my team and I took her to breakfast. I thought we'd have coffee and we'd talk a little bit and everything would be good. I said, well, what happened? He goes, well, she just started saying, what are you going to do about retention? And what are you going to do about engagement? And I said, well, what happened to you? He goes, well, I almost fell out of my chair. I felt like I was being attacked. And I said, well, what would have changed that? He goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, give me a question that you could ask her back that would have put you back in control.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, well, I suppose I could have asked her, you sound like you have a lot of passion around retention. Why don't you give me three of your best ideas? And
Yeah.
I go, bingo. Right. So what did he do? He just empowered the person. He just listened to the person and it changed changed the dynamics. And then, like months later, right. He's still 2 years later, he's still the CEO because he just changed. Like you said, he became the person who asked great questions, which truly empowers other people.
Yep. I was doing some sales training years ago with a guy, and this is like you can't do this in initial discovery call, but after the second, third phone call, it was so brilliant. Um, he was role playing with me, right? So I'm being myself, he's being the customer, and he asked the question, okay, so why should I hire you? And I started listing features and benefits. I said, what would you have said? And we reverse roles because, well, I don't know. Why do you think you should hire me? So he had the customer actually telling the vendor why they want to why they want to hire him. It was the most brilliant pivot I've ever seen in my life. Like, whoa, I can't do that early on, but later, second, third conversation that ever comes up, I could drop that one. So I don't know. Why do you think? And they'll just give you why they like you, what all the things that they are positive. It
Right.
was really creative.
The
So
value. It's
yeah,
good. It's a value proposition right there. It's
yeah,
being valuable,
yeah,
right? And it's the same thing that leaders do. Like the best leaders empower people,
yeah. Of course,
right? They
right.
empower people. They
Mm-hmm.
give people the opportunity to just shine.
Yeah.
Like if we're holding people down, you're holding people backwards. Like you don't have motivated people. You don't have
No,
inspired people. That's never going to happen.
no,
And
that's right.
it's a hard lesson for us to learn because you're sitting there and you're like, I'm in this position because I've studied and I've grown and I've
Yep.
for 22 years I've learned this business. And so you have all that and like you've got to help your people become the best version of themselves.
Yeah,
And then you have a winning team.
that's right.
Otherwise, you're repressing the people around you, and it
Yeah,
never works.
it's a definite style that I think it has a lot more legs in the hierarchy stuff. It's a good point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, speaking of leadership and getting some better tools and strategies for us, how can people get a hold of you and hire you?
Well, they can find me at the www.thewinningleadershipcompany.com. I know that's really long, but it's thewinningleadershipcompany.com. I wanted my name in there, Winn. So you can find me there. And here's what I will do for you people. Anybody who's listening or listening later, here's what I'm going to offer you today. And this is kind of crazy, but I am crazy. A little crazy out there, a little wild out there. Is I'll give your company a 1 hour free webinar, free. And that means I'm live, 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 live. Now, here's what you have to do in return. There's always a catch. I'm just going to tell you the catch. You have to promise to rant and rave about me to other organizations, associations, and people that you're going to market for me. In other words, you're going to write something on LinkedIn about me. You're going to talk about me. And in return, you get a full hour of this really powerful mindset training,
Wow.
powerful things that will turn your company around, guaranteed.
Listen, I've heard you speak publicly at one of our events, Sherry, so I can tell the audience there, if you are so fortunate and blessed to be able to get her for an hour for your company, consider yourself very lucky. That's a very generous offer. So make sure they're qualified when they contact you, okay?
Absolutely.
All right. It's great having you on the show today, Sherry. Thank you so much. TheWinningLeadershipCompany.com. Go there, check it out, connect with Sherry. You'll thank me later. Thanks so much. Boom, and we're out. Okay. Good job, of course. I didn't expect anything less out of you. That's great.
Thank you.